All right, we are live. I see folks coming in from the waiting room. So hello, hello, hello. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll just start in just a couple seconds as folks are migrating from the waiting room into our live virtual room here. Hello and welcome everyone. As we're getting everyone over into our live session, let us know where you're calling from. Just drop in the chat. Let us know where you are in the world. Would love to give you all a shout out here as we're getting folks into our main session here to kick off today's conversation. All right, I see we got London representing. Awesome. We've got Austin, Texas in the house. Great, great. So keep dropping in the chat where you're calling from. And I will just move on here with our introduction as we are going to dive in deep on this conversation that I know you all are waiting for. Some of you had a chance to join part 1 and part 2 of this series. So we are on part 3 of this series that I'll just pass the mic to our phenomenal guest speaker today in just a few moments. But before I pass the mic to Matthew Reynolds, just want to go over some quick housekeeping guidelines so that we can all stay comfortable and confident in this conversation. So we'd love for you to participate. I see folks are already dropping in the chat, letting us know where you're calling from. Thank you for that. Continue to use the chat to drop any questions that you might not have been able to submit in advance. We do have a lineup of questions that you all sent over to us that we're excited to touch on today. But if in any moment something comes up, please feel free to use the chat to drop those questions. And as time allows, I will raise those questions today for this hour. The hour is going to fly by quickly, so please make use of the chat. Also make use of the chat to network amongst yourselves. I know that a lot of you are taking time out of your day. A lot of you are also here to get that mindful leadership badge that Power to Fly is offering up for our callers. So thank you all for participating. And I encourage you all to drop your LinkedIns, your projects, your websites, your emails. I've even seen people drop their emails in the chat. Because we are clearly all here for a reason. And so, it's great to network with folks who are, trying to develop certain skills or at least to take the time out of our days, whether we're rewatching this or watching this live, to lean into that. So please drop whatever way that you prefer to be connected in the chat box. And keep in mind that we're recording. So if you signed up for this chat, be looking out for a rewatch link that will link to this very video so that you can rewatch this. I know some people might not have been able to join us live. So a lot of folks will be rewatching this. We had close to 500 people sign up for this chat. So a lot of people are interested in this topic. So if you're rewatching this, please feel free to share this with your community, with your colleagues, anyone you feel would get the benefit of just, being mindful in their leadership today. Also, let's see, what else do I want to say here? If anyone has any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, and you do write it something in the chat, just write to me privately. You'll find my name there, Mariella Marie. You can write to me privately in the chat and I'll raise your question or your reflection and keep you anonymous. So keep that in mind. All right. So for those of you who have not been a part of these chats where I've moderated before, I'll just take a brief second to introduce myself. So again, my name is Mariela Marie. I'm calling from the mighty mountains of Patagonia in Argentina in San Martin de los Andes, the original lands of the Mapuche people. And I am a lot of things, but for the sake of this conversation, let's say that I am a liberation facilitator. My goal is to help everyone see that we can move through the world fully liberated, fully practicing skills of empathy, these authentic dialogue, these so-called soft skills that more and more people are calling essential skills and power skills, which I love because, they can really help shift the world and change the world. And we can be the change that we want to see in these, pretty pivotal times that we're seeing here. So I love to lean into emotional intelligence and the importance of emotional intelligence, things like using authentic dialogue. A lot of you have maybe seen me speak with Dr. Sunjata, where we lean into the power of authentic dialogue, working together in a new dynamic and not having this power over hierarchy. We have this power with collaborative creation that we lean into here. So that's, me in a nutshell for those who have not met me before here on the chat. And I would love to connect with you. So in just a few moments, I'll also add ways that you can connect with me. And I see some folks are turning cameras on. Hello and welcome. Thank you all for participating. Now, without further ado, I'd love to pass the mic to my brother from another mother, dear colleague and friend of mine, Matthew Reynolds. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today. I know that as we speak, you are not at home. You are touring around, at least I think the West Coast of the States, speaking and sharing your workshop. And I know you have a book that later on I want to present as well to our live callers. But for those who have not joined part 1 and part 2 of this series and who have just never heard of you before, Matthew Reynolds, let us know about yourself, why you do what you do, and just kind of skim the surface of what you're excited to share with us today, Matthew.
Mariella, thank you so much. And Power to Fly and Paloma, thank you so much for having me here. It just feels really good, again, to be in community with you all. I am a world's creator, and to be able to be a world's creator, it's important for us to be a disruptor. And I think the biggest thing that my offering to others that I put out there into the world is that I guide people towards their own true authenticity. And I do that in a couple of ways, which I think we're going to dive into as we move forward. And yet I think the biggest thing is to really, truly disrupt those ideas that are self-deprecating, that hold us down, that hold us back, that sometimes, which once again, we'll get into more later, words that have been weaponized or used in a particular way to keep us upholding the status quo and dominant culture's ideas about ourselves and the work that we do. And so it's all about disrupting that, creating and building something new and feeling empowered to build that new and really allowing that to come from the heart. So thank you so much for that, Mariella.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. And I just want to shout out folks for writing in the chat so that we know we are calling from a little bit of all over the place today, which is great because we can hopefully see us implementing these things in our respective places in the world. So again, we've got London on the line, Austin, Texas, Omaha, Nebraska, Los Angeles, California, Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Arizona, Portugal, California, Michigan. Awesome. So thank you all for dropping in the chat. Atlanta, Georgia represent. Great. Oakland. Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because I know that Matthew, I asked, since you've been doing this on a couple of our other series together, and it's just been a great anchoring point before we jump into some of these really heady questions today. Can you guide us to just come to stillness and be present? And I also invite people to close the many tabs that they might have open on their computer if you're watching this live with us or if you're rewatching this, so that you can be fully present and have space in your mind and in your heart to just really hear what we're saying here and work with people who are here doing the same as you to try to deconstruct some of these things that kind of keep us stagnant and keep us from being our full authentic selves. So Matthew, can you lead us through just a brief grounding meditation before we roll into questions today?
Most definitely. Thank you so much for this, Mariella, and thank you yourself. Thank you all for being here, but thank yourself for being here and being a part of this as we move forward. And so just go ahead and allow yourself to settle into a really heavy pelvic floor, pelvis. Allow that to sit heavy where you're at. Allow both feet to be flat on the floor. Wiggle your toes a little bit, scrunch them up, release them, scrunch them up, release them. Let yourself be there. And as we allow ourselves to go into a soft focus and the palms of our hands are gently relaxing on our thighs so that our shoulders can relax and go down and our posture muscles are activated and allowing that pelvis to be heavy. My spine is pulling apart. And as my eyes are gently closing and maybe I want to look through my lashes, which I call a soft focus, or I'm able to close my eyes all the way. I'm imagining a golden thread that is attached and coming out the crown of my head. And for some of us, we might want to put a gentle touch right there if we're able to, and feel the crown of our head, just so to give ourselves a little sensory touch there as this golden thread reaches out and pulls out into the universe and is just going out into that space and time, so that there's a little bit of tension, a rise up that's happening in our posture muscles as our pelvis is feeling heavy, and the imagery of sinking down into the earth and being able to go into that hot core and allowing those two ends to be pulling from each other as I take a deep breath and visualize my lungs being three-dimensional beings, and they go in all directions when I inhale. It's just not the upper part of my chest. It's just not my belly, but it's that whole chest cavity that is expanding in all directions as I take a deep breath in through my nose and be able to exhale through my mouth. And I know for some of us, this is imagery that's going on because our bodies may move in different ways or be held in different ways or have different abilities to them. As I take another deep breath and allow myself to be present, to be here, to be in this moment as I exhale. And I want folks out there to take another deep breath in and to trust the process. As you exhale, trust the process. And now we're just going to allow ourselves to sit in this moment. And leaving your mics muted, I'd like for you to repeat after me. I am worthy. You are worthy. I will allow my authenticity to be at the forefront of my words and actions in this moment. Thank you all for being here. Gently allow yourself to come back into the space fully present with the eyes opening and with yourself leading with that authenticity. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. All right. So I hope that that has shifted something within us as we go into this next hour. So, just to kick things off, we are all curious to learn how to be better at what we do, which is living our lives, right? A lot of conflict is happening in the world. Tensions are rising. And so a lot of us who call ourselves leaders want to know, how can we do better, right? So the first question that you all have submitted really is, it's a great opportunity for us to collaborate together. So the first question reads, what's the definition of an influential leader? And instead of Matthew Reynolds or myself giving you our personal definition, we really want to be the change that we want to see. So we want to invite you all into crafting, co-creating this definition with us. Why are we doing this? Well, you see, we started this meeting with a grounding exercise, right? We're not just starting talking, and giving our ideas and, ping-ponging our voices off of each other. We really want to connect our body, our mind, connect with people here. So we want to ask you to connect with us on creating this definition. So thank you for submitting this, whoever did. And I'd like to have us just for a minute come up with a definition together. And there are going to be no wrong answers. Okay, so if you got your pen or pencil like Matthew Reynolds just showed us, great. If you want to type in the chat, great. But this is what I want you all to do. I want you all to think of two influential leaders in your life. So maybe these are legends, maybe they are no longer with us, maybe they're living legends, maybe they're currently still here in the world with us. Keep these two influential leaders in your mind's eye. And I'd like for you to just reflect on these two influential leaders that you have in your mind's eye. What were their circumstances? So, what do you know about their lived experience? What makes you attracted to the way that they led people or they currently lead people? What attracts you about their style of leadership? Keep these two people in mind. So what were their circumstances? What were their lived experiences? What makes you attracted to the way that they lead people? or have led people? And just reflect on this a little bit and see how you feel. What comes up for you? What feelings come up? Now, here comes the fun part. Let's imagine that we can have a moment together with these people. So, let's say a tea time with this person. I'll give you an example. I really love James Baldwin, and James Baldwin is no longer with us. So, I'm going to imagine myself having tea with James Baldwin and asking him questions and reflecting on just the way that he could lead people and just invite people to think differently. Whoever that is for you, whoever the two influential leaders you have in your mind's eye, bring them to the table, sit with them. Of course, you have to use your imagination in this case, unless you have, that person right next to you. It might be your kid, it might be your parent. So that's really great if that is true. But sit with these people at the table, having tea with them, and tell them what you admire about them. So fill in this blank. We're going to do like a little Mad Libs here. I admire the way that you lead, the way that you list one thing. If you can list another thing, that's great also. If you can list one more thing, that's even greater. So I admire the way that you XYZ. So I might say, James Baldwin, I admire the way that you led, the way that you spoke, the way that you moved in the world and visited other countries to share your knowledge, and the way that you always had empathetic questioning a part of your dialogue. So that might be three things that I say about James Baldwin. So whoever you have in your mind's eye, think of that. What would you tell them? I admire the way you lead. I admire the way that you X, Y, and Z. And if you can drop some of those in the chat, I would love to see what's coming up for you all there. So this is just a moment with people that we admire in our mind's eye. We're using our imagination again to craft our own definition of what makes an influential leader. So a lot of us have different lived experiences. As we read in the beginning, we're all calling from different parts of the world, and leadership looks different everywhere. If you all look at some of the conversations that Matthew Reynolds and I have had before, we challenge you all to consider that everyone is a leader in their own way. So some of us have these titles written down on our desks, some of behind our email handles, that we are the CEO of something, or we are the director of XYZ. And so we have these official titles that show our leadership capabilities or the roles that we might have in a workplace, for example. But throughout our day, we are influencing people. We're influencing people around us, people we work with. So I see that we have some things coming up in the chat. And if those who don't want to contribute in the chat, it's okay, but keep those questions in your mind's eye here. So we have, I admire the way that you are your authentic self. Thank you for adding that. Someone else says, empathetic, uplifting, listened, well-spoken, and inspiring. Thank you for writing that in the chat. Someone says, I admire the way that you led through the unapologetic truth of your authenticity and desire to love all of humanity. Nice. The chat box is heating up here. So someone else writes, I admire the way that you led, the way you see people and their unique gifts. I admire the way you think creatively to connect people, the way you always find a silver lining. Thank you for writing that in the chat. Someone else writes, I admire the way that you lead informing of your experiences and perspectives in a thought-provoking way, inviting the team to think and mind map freely, armed with knowledge and free will. Excellent. Nice. I'm just going to read a couple more. I love that you all are writing in the chat. Thank you so much. Someone else writes, I admired that you listened. I admired how diplomatic, cool, and uplifting you are. Your kindness, your strength, your resilience, so inspiring. Your approach to conversations with the mindset of positive intent in all people. Thank you so much, everyone. And we've got folks who are still writing in the chat, and maybe you're rewatching this, and I encourage you to, keep a note for yourself, because this is influential leadership, right? It's not what I think it is. It's not what Matthew thinks it is. It's listening to each other, asking questions, seeing what everyone has to say, and saying, you know what, I resonate with that. I'm going to rethink my own definition that I've been programmed to think based on my own lived experiences, right? Because I can see that, you know, a lot of people are saying different things in the chat, but that all align with having some sort of influence on you, the person that wrote in the chat. Um, Wow, I can say so much more about this. Matthew Reynolds, can you share a little bit about what you think? And also, I think this is also a really good time for you to ask us the question that you always ask, which I admire from you, is how much of our thinking is our thinking? So as we are redefining what influential leadership means, just to kick off this session, I'd love for you to talk to us about that.
Yeah, thank you, Mariella. I think it's really interesting because a lot of what we've discussed in our last two conversations, I see in these definitions. You know, there's a lot of words that are being used that are those empowerment skills that we talked about, words that normally are kind of shunned from this work, from being a leader, that it's supposed to be, no, we need to do these particular factual things so that we get this outcome. You know, we start creating a team by finding, you know, the people who are going to be a part of the team, and we're going to put those folks together that are going to be the best for the team to achieve this outcome, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of humanity that's left out of that. Yet your definitions that folks are writing from those leaders that were influential, I personally am seeing a whole bunch of humanity within it. And so then I asked myself this question long ago about my work. And now I'm going to ask you all, how much of your thinking is your thinking? You've gone to school and maybe possibly you learned this, and or you've gotten a certificate and you've learned this way of, this is how I set up my teams. These are the things that I do. These are my benchmarks that I need to reach at this particular time. Check these things off. Check, check, check. This shows and proves that I'm doing work. I can then prove how far along I am on it. And I'm not poo-pooing that process. What I'm asking is to infuse in that process the things that you just put in the chat, the humanity aspect of it, because it's missing. And a lot of folks are like, oh, well, it's thought about, that it's already there. It's already in our mind that we're thinking of the human. Out of sight, out of mind, y'all. Put it out there. Let folks see that. Let yourself see that, because then it helps us as an individual make sure that we are leading with that humanity first and foremost. And it may seem like a small minutia thing, or it may seem like it's so nitpicky and tedious. And yet the results, I guarantee you that you will get, is you will get people writing these very things that you just put in there about you as the leader of that team for that particular project, because the humanity was in there. And so I invite you to mind that by asking yourself, as you put these things together, how much of my thinking is my thinking? What am I putting out there that has to deal with humanity? Because you all just, at least those who have shared thus far, you showed that you want to lead with that humanity, because it's what you saw in another leader that inspired you, that moved you, that got you possibly to be sitting in the position that you are right now. So bring that forward. Let that be forward. Let that be a large part of how you're moving things forward in this world. Thank you, Mariella.
Thank you, Matthew. So quick comeback here. What if people are afraid? Afraid to be all of these things that people have dropped in the chat. And of course, I want you to answer this, but with a caveat, because I know that you have a book out. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. Biggest, fullest, brightest. Shifting the consciousness of humanity. So this is a book that, as we mentioned in the introduction, Matthew Reynolds is actually touring a little bit on the West Coast of the States now. And later he'll mention a little bit about his workshop. But this book, I think, is a great reference for this conversation, because you speak a lot about your personal journey and essentially how you became your own guiding light to find your own authenticity, to basically leave a lot of these oppressive systems in the workplace, in different communities, based on who you are in the world, that did not support your freedom and did not support the freedom of your expression. So I'd love to, because it seems like, I mean, and I know you personally, so not to not to spill any beans, but it seems like you don't let that fear take over the core of what you want to share, which are what people have dropped in the chat, and to you don't want to say no to that because you're afraid of not checking the boxes, of not, you know, showing that you don't play by certain rules anymore, that you want to shift, as you say in the title here, shifting the consciousness of humanity. So I'm just going to read people. It's nice. So someone has written in the chat, feel the fear and do it anyway. Thank you, Audrey, for writing that in chat. So question will come after this, but I'm just going to read a quick synopsis here. Who am I? Where do I fit in? Almost everyone has asked those questions in his book, Biggest, Fullest, Brightest, Shifting the Consciousness of Humanity. Matthew Reynolds tells his story of struggling to find a place of belonging in a world that continually tells him he isn't good enough. He experienced strife from the day he was born to a white mother and a Black father in the time before interracial marriage was legal or accepted. As a child, he became aware that he was attracted to the same gender and recognized that being Black and gay made him doubly different and perceived as very much, quote, less than. Driven by an overwhelming desire to blend in, he created a persona that allowed him to function in the world, but at what cost? In order to find himself and reclaim his true identity, the author has spent his entire life doing the grueling work with the capital W necessary to achieve that goal. Extensive research, professional assistance, and his lived experiences have unveiled subconscious coping mechanisms that allowed him to survive, but not to live. What's more, he discovered that he was not alone in living a lie, and the devices he used to get by were in fact universal. This book invites you to explore the reasons why you think the way that you do. It will take you on a long journey through your past to your present and help create your future, a future that is based in equity, love, and respect. So I definitely am, have a lot of questions, but I want you to just reflect on, you know, your personal journey. Obviously, in the synopsis here, you've been through a lot in a country, in a state that did not accept you for who you are, and you have, from what it looks like, come out on the other side, and actually you are guiding people to connect with their authentic voice and to take up space, you know, and create more safe spaces for others to do the same. So Matthew, can you just share a little bit about your journey there? Because I know that some people listening might be in that same position where they are told no, they are tokenized, they are, you know, used even as a weapon. As we talk about, some of these big words like, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging have become weaponized in a lot of spaces and workplaces, especially. So Matthew Reynolds, just please let us know, you know, what you have to share about your journey regarding, you know, being a guiding light, being a leader in this world.
Thank you for that, Mariella. And thank you, Audrey, for the feel the fear and do it anyway. I think that that's a huge part of it, is that the start of the journey, the start of me really looking at this is realizing that at some point, my cognitive brain when I was young was taking information in from those who were supposed to be protecting me, providing for me, unconditionally loving me, in any way that didn't allow for folks to truly step into their intrinsic motivations. The society was quick to socialize myself into this box that I'm supposed to be a particular way. First, I'm supposed to be a particular way because of my gender, because of my biological gender. I'm supposed to be a particular way because of my skin color, supposed to be a particular way because of who my soul was attracted to was of the same gender, was supposed to be a particular way because of where I grew up, who my parents were, what church I attended, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things that were telling me that this is who you're supposed to be. And no one just asked, who are you? And how are you? And so as I grew older, started to get more and more education, started realizing the omissions in my education, started realizing the indoctrinations in my education, did I start going, wait a minute, this isn't the truth, or there are things missing. Why don't people trust me to make my decisions on how I feel about these facts, especially historical facts, to come to conclusions and have my emotions around them? and how that was influencing the way I was dealing with other people, other situations in the world. So I kept unpacking it. It's like when someone puts that little tiny box in the bottom of a box at Christmas time or whatever holiday you might, and you stuff all that paper in it and stuff, and it's just this little tiny gift in this huge box. Ha ha ha, very funny, kind of thing, as somebody's digging through all of it. But that's really what I was doing. I was digging through all of this stuff of others telling me how I'm supposed to be and who I'm supposed to be. And then as I started to educate and learn even more, I started going again, how much of my thinking is my thinking? This right here and how I'm responding, or what you're telling me a leader should be, or how I should lead these things, is all about productivity and numbers only. I don't ever hear you talking about the human who is creating these numbers and putting this product together and putting these things out there. Why are we missing that part? And I was literally told, well, that's a given. Of course it's there. And yet I was seeing the ways in which people were talking were extremely dehumanizing, and we're actually taking away people's humanity so that we could work those extra hours. And then I started looking at how it was fed into society, that we are supposed to be working on a particular level in a particular way, et cetera, to what end? And then we were told, oh, this is the end. You're supposed to be striving for this. Well, that didn't line up with who I was as a person. I wanted to strive towards more humanity led. I wanted to strive towards more people genuinely being happy about what they've created or put out into the world. And that could happen in any sector. It doesn't have to be just like the theater that I created, or the arts, or the aspect of school and getting a child to graduate on time, or whatever those benchmarks are. I feel that it goes into everything that we as humanity have created and are putting out there right now. And so this idea of fear, because of course I had that fear as well. Am I going to be shunned? Am I going to lose my job? Are people not going to like this? But then I started really realizing that some of that indoctrination, some of those lies were huge. And I started seeing how a lot of it that I was taking in and considering to be truths about myself and how I should be in the world were based on lies. And so for me, it became a very simple act of going, wow, I don't subscribe to that ideology, because all of that is based on a lie. It's not true. The idea of white and whiteness, the idea of supremacy, of colonization, because you created a weapon that can kill more people more rapidly so that you can conquer them and take their resources and then manifest destiny and make them pray the same way as you. That's a truth? No, I think we as humanity are so much more than that. And so now I believe in guiding folks to shifting that consciousness of humanity and allowing us to become something more than that, instead of staying in this fixed mindset that it needs to always be this way, that we are only supposed to lead in this particular way, instead of guiding and influencing in a way that is more circular and not linear and not hierarchical either, and definitely not patriarchal. So I tried to step on some of the stepping stones, because as you said, Mariella, I could dive in and talk about this and talk and ask more questions of you all who are listening, and really go there with it. So I look forward to an opportunity of doing that in the future, but I know we have other questions that people have given us. So thank you for that.
Yes, we have lots more questions. And also, I've dropped some helpful links in the chat for folks who want to continue to connect with Matthew Reynolds and myself. I've put our LinkedIn's here. I've also put a Google form here in case you're interested in having a complimentary consultation with us to learn and see more about the work that we do, to see how to maybe bring it to your teams, or if you want to, have it be an individual adventure for yourself as a leader, please check out that Google form there, and we'll be in touch with you. And so, yes, let's move on to this question then, because you also bring it up in your book, and I think it just will be nice to tie the two together. So this person submitted the question that reads, "How can leaders encourage their teams to be vulnerable and open to constructive conversations?" And when I hear that question, I think of the chapter in your book, I think it's chapter 4, where you talk about failing. And so you use the acronym FAIL. And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about that. And maybe, this can answer the question, how can leaders encourage teams to be vulnerable and open to constructive conversations?
Thank you for that. FAIL, it's an acronym for First Attempt in Learning. I believe that when we have this end goal in mind, or we have some of the outside influences of perfectionism, a dear friend says that he is a perfectionist in recovery, we start to miss some of the learning and teaching that can occur from doing it wrong. And a lot of times, I started out as a mathematician and an aeronautical engineer, and a professor at that time really talked about make sure you're writing everything down, do your best to not skip steps, because then you can find where you misstepped, right? And you can see it because it's written out and it's right there, and you can go back and you can adjust. So I think that a lot of times folks get so fixated that we need to be here by this date. We need to have this much produced. We need to have this big of a change happen in this sector or these ideas, that we don't ever spend time truly allowing ourselves to be in that fail, and allowing that first attempt in learning to be part of our humanity within the moment, and go, oh yeah, we're human. We're going to make mistakes. It's part of it. And there's so much more in it, because sometimes within that fail, we find another pathway that isn't even getting us to this goal, because now we found out, oh, we don't even want this. We've already achieved that. We actually want to go way over here or way over there or way, you know what I mean? But instead, we fix our mindset into this one path. These are our policies and procedures, or this is the way that a team is supposed to function. So we're going to do it this way to get there. And that isn't always the truth of the matter. And I think that it really relies on the team that we pull together, allowing that team to be authentic to themselves and bring that authenticity in a brave and safe space, allowing the humanity to be in the room. And to be honest, I think we would spend less time working on some of the things, because, this pressure of like, you're not really successful, or you're not really showing us that you're a great employee unless you're working over the 40 hours a week. What? No, I think we can do it in less than 40. I think we can do it less than 32 half the time. And then have a lot of time about our wellness and human interaction and being with family and friends and connecting in that aspect of it. So how, once again, I come back to, how do we make sure we put the humanity in it? I think is the first place to go when we ask ourselves that question. And I think that it's really about letting people have their authenticity be a part of what's in the room, instead of saying, you know what, leave that at the door, because I need you to be this person on this team to achieve this, instead of coming in and being like, hey, this went on last night. Can we talk about this for a second? Because it's really disrupting me and I'm having difficulty leaving at the door, and being like, oh yeah, and allowing that humanity to be there, right? I think is going to help with those things be different. And a lot of times when people push back on it and are like, oh, that's a bunch of woo-woo, and I don't want to go there. I didn't come here to talk about my emotions and who I am. I came here to do work. It's like, but your heart's still beating, isn't it? You're still breathing in air, aren't you? Your humanity is in this room anyway, in the first place. So it's like, can we allow that to be here? And it's new. It's new to a lot of us to allow that to happen. And within that, there's empowerment for everybody in that circle to be their biggest, fullest, and brightest, and to bring their best work to it. Instead of, I got to get there quick. So let me just throw this out. And oh, we're only going there, but I see this cool thing that's happening over here, but that's not getting us there. So I better not waste time by going there. When in all actually, if everybody could turn and go there, you'd get even more out of the situation than what you first did, but you won't know unless you try. So I hope that I answered the question somewhat, Um, yeah, thank you for that.
Yes. Yes, yes. And actually, I want to just give you a couple more moments to drift on that, because last time we kind of touched on this, and I think for fear of, maybe you know bringing too much power to the conversation, you didn't go in deep, but someone specifically asked a question relating to this, so I'd love to just hear you to dive in here. This person wrote, to me, power is a concept aligned with a more hierarchical system. How would you redefine power so that it can feel like a more inclusive term?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Power is a construct as well. Who says that because you own this land that most of the time was stolen in the first place, or that you just wanted to say, I'm going to take this because God said, or whoever said that I could, kind of thing? That isn't power to me. It's greed. And it's definitely dehumanizing. And so when I talk about power, we create the human body. This shell creates electricity through our heartbeat. That's power. We are all powerful. Every single one of us, we have power. And as I do my work, I find more and more people don't feel empowered to go somewhere else, to say, hey, let's look over here. They don't feel empowered to be like, you know what? I don't subscribe to this ideology. I'm gonna forge ahead and create this new path. And I'm going to empower people I come along with to contribute to a collaboration for us to get there. And a lot of times when we're in these leadership positions, we forget about collaboration or we clamp down on it. To me, collaboration is empowerment in the sense that it's like, I've brought this team together because there's a diversity of thought here. And when we put whatever the problem or whatever we're trying to achieve in the center of all of us, and all of us through our lived experience starts to pull and stretch that idea into something else, we get what we were looking for and then some. And it goes beyond it, more than we could even have imagined in the first place. So allow a true collaboration to happen. Allow each person for who they are to pull and tug without shutting things down. No, 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 that's not what we're talking about. We're not going there. No, 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 that's not what. But if you would have let them talk and work through their idea or process, they would have connected it very quickly to where we are going. But we shut it down really quickly and don't let them continue that thought because we don't see how it connects to where we're trying to get to. So once again, allowing the humanity to be there, empowering each other because we all have power.
But does that mean that people lose money? Because people are afraid of that. They don't want to put the person in the middle. They don't want to put the humanity in the middle, because that means money isn't in the middle. That means money could be lost. I think we have to dismantle, reimagine how to thrive in the world. We talked about this a little bit in part 2, but and we asked the audience, how many of you feel like you're thriving or just surviving in the world, right? So, I just, as you're speaking, it's like, if we feel afraid as leaders to say, okay, no, I know, they're going to ask me about the bottom line. I need to make sure the numbers are there and the data and the money, we're further and further pushing the human out of the center so that we can get these numbers or get this money. All of a sudden, you're asking us to put the human in the center. And so what does that do with the money? What does that do with the data that people are holding on to and putting closing the door to humanity's essential skills, right? The communication, the collaboration, these 4 C's that you speak of. Of course, it's taking a risk because historically speaking, at least in our current so-called Western modern civilization, money has been at the heart of a lot of the things that you mentioned before, taking land, asking people to assimilate instead of co-creating and bringing their cultures to the center. So how can people get over that fear if they are in a leadership role And yes, they want to ask empathetic questions, but they only have 5 minutes for the meeting because they got to make this money. How can people not be afraid to lose money and lose data by centering the human, I guess is the question.
First and foremost, thank you for the question. Secondly, Edgar Villanueva, Decolonizing Wealth. His book, he touches on a lot of that. He comes from a philanthropic perspective. And when I read that book and began to understand that I had given power to money. Money doesn't have a heartbeat. It doesn't create electricity. We do. You ain't going to make it if there ain't no people there. I mean, is the bottom line, right? So once we stop treating money as this powerful thing and that it has power over us, no, we as human beings infused it with power so that instead of doing direct bartering with one another, I've got this skill, you've got that skill, I need this thing, you need that thing, we're going to barter and trade those things. We gave money that bartering power, right? We infused it with that energies. And so now that's the energy it has. And just because someone's going to fire me because we didn't make this money or we lost this money doesn't mean that money itself has power. It's got energy, but not power. Okay. So when I think of what you just asked and how you're saying that, there's a difference to me between capitalism and allowing ourselves to be creative beings, because that's what we are. This wants to be curious. So when I pull a team together, I want to make sure that I'm sparking their curiosity about this next project. And once I spark their curiosity about it and allow them to be empowered, they get creative. And we've already pulled them together for that collaboration. And then that human connection can start to happen. And like I said, you got to trust the process that you will achieve that goal and then some, and even go beyond that. And the money will come. And there's those that have a difficult time with that and aren't going to see that. And sometimes maybe those aren't the people to be on your team. Or maybe possibly it's time for you to take your leadership skills and start something new that is led in a way that doesn't have money being more powerful over a human being.
Absolutely. And we are by no means saying that you don't need to make money because people need a house, they need to eat. We're not poo-pooing on it. Just decentering it so that we put the human in the center, right? And so that leads to this next question here. We've got a lot of things coming up in the chat privately as well. Someone wrote that this is such a great and interesting conversation. Thank you for having this conversation. Someone else wrote, interesting point considering where we are with artificial intelligence today. I feel like that could use a whole hour to talk about, how we can influence machine learning and artificial intelligence as humans behind the technology. Maybe Paloma, we can schedule that for a future conversation. So this next question reads, how can we lead and influence without coming across as aggressive? So Matthew, I'd love to hear you respond to this. Initially, my first reflections are, of course, always putting the mirror in front of ourselves and practicing empathy first with ourselves. So if we feel this aggressiveness or this tension, arising in our body, a lot of us are experiencing things like burnout or feeling displaced or feeling like we don't have a voice because we're being gaslit. Like all these things happen in the workplace, no matter if you consider yourself a leader or not. And so maybe, we that means we have to feel like we need tougher skin in order to show that we need this role. We're great at this role. No one else can do it like we can. So we get this tough, aggressive skin that really is just hurting ourselves and hurting other people. It's not allowing for collaboration to happen. It's not allowing for, growth essentially to happen. Maybe you're making some numbers here and there as far as, the data and the financial points are concerned, but maybe you're losing way more people and then paying more for it in the end. Maybe your health is, not doing well and you're going to pay for that more in the end. So it's coming across as aggressive just to be a leader, I mean, for that seemed just so old world at this point. But something that I would bring up is to continuously ask for feedback from people who you are supposedly leading. So you can do that through empathetic listening and empathetic questioning, and also bringing up some of these things that we wrote in the chat earlier today about, what makes an influential leader, bringing those up into, if you feel like if you have been told, or because you know yourself that you are too aggressive as a leader, start to ask more empathetic questions to the people, and practice listening, and not listening and thinking what you're going to say before someone finishes, like really asking for what they need, what they, asking if they feel heard even. And I think that things like mentorship and sponsorships are great, like to put that into practice, to putting these skills of empathetic listening and empathetic questioning into practice by mentoring someone or by sponsoring someone, either by, dropping your name in a hat or putting some money in the bank for this person because you believe in them. And that is something that, what is the imagery that, we stand on the shoulders of great people that have come before us, right? And so doing that, sending the elevator back down, a lot of people say that as well. And I think that will hopefully be able to ease the aggression. I mean, there are totally lots more alternatives there. We can go deep into emotional intelligence practices, but just how we started this meeting with a nice short reflection and meditation, you have several ways that you can look for how to just ground yourself and meditate to not go into this like reactive stage, which comes off as aggressive in a lot of cases. So I'm rambling at this point, but Matthew, would love to hear how you would reflect on this question. How can we lead and influence without coming across as aggressive?
And you weren't rambling at all. Those spot on as far as I'm concerned. I want to come at it from the perspective of how much of your thinking is your thinking, because this face, this skin, right? This outlook walks into a room. I'm already aggressive because of indoctrination, because of some of the things that we've been programmed to think, right? And I mean, and that's just being truthful and honest with ourselves. How much of my thinking is my thinking? Is this really the way I feel about this other person? Right? And I have mine. It's a particular height, male, usually white-bodied, a suit, a really crisp tie. It makes me super nervous and I get quiet and I don't talk and I don't say things. So then when I'm working, if I have not established that intimacy, if I've not built that trust within my team, then me being passionate about what we're doing may come across as being aggressive. And part of it might be because of their implicit bias and what their indoctrination has been, how they are seeing the world, and them needing to ask themselves how much of their thinking is their thinking. And so we aren't offering the quick fix and the pill. It's like, no, drink this and everything's going to be fine. Everybody's going to think this way. It's all going to happen in this sense. No, we are uprooting some really intimate things to be able to shift and put humanity first. I loved when you said that, Mariella. I'm decentering money and putting the human there, because the bottom line is the human being. AI or not is the human being, because there still was a human being who programmed that AI, who built the machine that the AI is placed within, et cetera, et cetera. It all comes back to the human being. So why do we not center the humanity and the human being first in all these situations, in all of them? We really, truly haven't done that. We have constantly, the greater we of humanity, we've pushed it in other ways. The lords, the kings, the queens, that lorded over people, that were their serfs, that were lower than them, that whole hierarchical way of thinking, they just became faces. They didn't know names. They didn't know anything about the people that were making them more money, that were feeding them, that were doing all these things. So how is it any different than now? Again, I'm a disruptor. I'm a guide. I'm guiding people to help them disrupt this way of being so that humanity can truly grow into its biggest, fullest, and brightest. So I'm helping humanity to shift the consciousness of humanity. So that's my answer to that question.
Thank you. Someone in the chat wrote fear of vulnerability. And I think that, you know, we can go on and deep and down the well of, you know, how to guide, how to be an influential leader, using all of these essential skills that we're talking about. You know, there's so many that we can talk about. But what I want to leave with, because we just got a couple more minutes, I really want to hold to light what someone wrote in the chat here: fear of vulnerability, which I think most, if not all, people who call themselves leaders feel. This fear of being vulnerable. So, I mean, you did a great job with this book to point out how to use that fear of vulnerability to basically, you know, shed that skin. You talk a lot of ways about facing that, as you call it, the shadow self. But can you just leave us on a positive note, Matthew Reynolds, through all of the ways that we could be disruptors and put the human in the center and trust? You know, you led this conversation of, you know, trusting ourselves, our authentic selves, when there's so much noise happening and there's so many things that are being weaponized in order to make the money or to get the data. How can we not be afraid of being vulnerable in these times? How can we create something new? I mean, you know, these are big questions that I'm asking you to summarize in about 4 minutes here, but you know, you have such an eloquent way of speaking and sharing your knowledge. And I just also want to highlight, I'm dropping in the chat too, ways that you can continue to connect with us. If you're rewatching, just look out for that rewatch email. But Matthew, fear of vulnerability in these changing times. What do you have to say to the leaders on the call today?
Fear is a part of being human. We are these multifaceted beings. I am to feel all the emotions. I'm to feel angry and sad and grieve and you know, powerful and ecstatic and confused and frustrated. All those things are beautiful because they make us human. And so if I look at it from the perspective that it is part of being human, then it cannot take me out of the equation. My shadow used to sneak up on me. So my shadow was built out of a lot of those indoctrinations that I spoke about at first, and I ingested them and I internalized them. So they became the way that Matthew moved in the world, how he reacted, responded, was in the world in certain situations. Now the authentic me is owning that more truthfully. And so by digesting that and saying, okay, that isn't me, the shadow now can't sneak up on me and jump on my back. And all of a sudden now I'm self-doubting everything that I am doing. I'm fearful of stepping into my truth. I'm fearful of the shadow. I'm fearful of all these things. It's like, no, I see you. I know what you're made of. I know how in my past is my education. I know that in my past, these situations occurred in my life that keep me from truly standing and being worthy of this life. So fear of being vulnerable, we're vulnerable when we get in a car and hurl ourselves at high speeds down a highway in this big steel and metal thing. But I'm not going to share that, oh, what you just said made me feel this way, or I'm sparked by what you just said. And I want to like continue on with that, but I want to finish listening to you first and hearing what you're saying. Vulnerable? Is it being vulnerable or is it just being human? And aren't we supposed to be vulnerable because it's part of being human? And I know that I'm getting a little esoteric within all of it, but that's part of the reason why I asked at the very beginning for us to be able to be here and allow myself and my authenticity to be at the forefront of my words and actions in this time together. I feel like the authentic me has just been living in the last 3 to 5 years as I've really been diving into this and saying, that's not my work. That's not my work. I'm centering humanity and humans first and foremost. And in all those situations, all that other stuff has come to fruition tenfold at times because I've allowed my humanness to be at the forefront. And may we all continue to allow our authenticity to be at the forefront. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening.
Yes, yes. What a great way to end this conversation. So we've just got a couple more seconds left, and I see that folks are writing in the chat. So I dropped some helpful links again so that you all could connect with us. Folks are saying thank you, Matthew, and to Mariella as well for sharing today. Thank you, Stephanie, for dropping that in the chat. So we hope to be sharing more in the future. We'll see if we can get back on Power to Fly. This is wrapping up our series. This is part 3 of our series. Definitely recommend checking out part 1 and part 2. I know a lot of you are looking for that mindful leadership badge. And so we've dropped in the chat how you can get your mindful leadership badge. Hopefully we'll be seeing you in the future here on Power to Fly. But at any rate, we would love for you to support our offerings. I've dropped links in the chat. You can pick up Matthew Reynolds' book, Biggest, Fullest, Brightest, Shifting the Consciousness of Humanity. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. You can find our work and work with us, hopefully, because this is what we love doing. If you can't tell by just listening to us talk for an hour. And we hope that you have collected some goodies and resources to share in the workplace and in your community. So take care, everyone. We believe in you. Thank you for participating in today's chat. Matthew Reynolds, thank you for all that you do. And thank you, Power to Fly. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.